Hello everybody and welcome to another Future of the Fortress. This is a recording of the monthly Q&A hosted on the Bay 12 forums discussing everything about Dwarf Fortress. Members of the Bay 12 Games community ask questions in the thread, and Tarn responds to them. If you would like to take part in these discussions, I will leave a link to the thread in the description of this video. And without further ado, let's dive into the Bay 12 Games report for May 1st, 2026. Happy birthday to Gustafer and Coco. They are both 1 year old. I've been splitting my time between the next routine patch, dinosaurs, and magic. It's a pretty exciting time. If I get a ritual cast in fort mode this month, I'll be happy with my progress there. There are lots of prehistoric creatures, so I imagine that'll be the main focus of June. But then, patch, and then more magic, with an emphasis on actual fort mode effects. We sold 6,500 copies in April, just like March. Thank you very much, Tarn. And happy birthday to Gustafer and Coco, the cats. So this seems to be a bit of a long one today. Tarn actually had to spread it out over 2 posts. So let's dive into the first question. Actually, it's a 2-parter. From Kodyo, does coexisting mean the next patch will actually feature these laboratories and prehistory generated civilizations in April? And future monthly patches will contain incremental magic updates? And Tarn quotes Putnam's response, so I'll read that first. No. She writes, it means we can work on routine patches and magic work at the same time without them interfering with each other. And Tarn continues, Putnam's correct. It just means that we'll be able to do patches like the Quality of Life patch and the early summer dinosaur patch, while also progressing on magic. In the pre-Steam days, I would disappear for months, or even years at a time working on features. And Cody's second question is as follows. What are examples of the mentioned magical forces that everybody will have links to during history generation? What kind of effects will this have in Fortress mode? And Tarn's response is, I think that particular example was for original people and ancients that had easy access to universal forces. This would be stuff like being able to tap into the power of the ocean to create water, or other mysteries of the universe for combat effects. Generally, any civilizations of this sort will be destroyed before your fort comes into the scene to make the game playable, but some of those critters could still be around. We'd like more magical universes to exist, where the regular civilizations like dwarves might still hang on to some of this raw power without having to study, but we have to be more careful about that. Next is a 3-parter from Jurist McSaddist, but Tarn responds to questions 2 and 3 at once, so I will read those 2 together, but of course, start with the first one. Vaguely, how far way away are we from being able to change laws in a meaningful way? And Tarn's response is, they don't exist in a meaningful way yet, which is the main roadblock. Entity rewrite and start scenarios is still hovering right after the magic and underground map and adventure mode site stuff, so it's not as far away as many other things. And Jurist McSaddist's second question, are any fort wizards going to be using evil magic? And if yes, will any dwarves get upset to share a fort with a wizard who sacrifices puppies to demons or whatever? And Tarn's response is, this is an ongoing discussion. I think dwarves should maintain some of their principles, even in the face of the player inviting all sorts of trouble in. And the next question is from Inarius, and they say, do I understand correctly, we could have some sort of adventurer archaeology, such as finding ancient worlds and stuff? And Tarn's response is, I think the adventurer side of it, for the most part, will require a more proper underground map rewrite push, as mentioned in the nearer term development notes, in order to provide more access. But some ruins might be accessible. Dwarves will be digging them out at first. But yeah, it'll be exciting to develop more and more of this, with games over multiple sites, to really find out what other civs we're up to. And a question from the Plump Helmet Man, and he writes, I'm curious, will the pre-World Gen magic sites be inhabited by new proc-gen creature categories such as those hinted at in your pre-Steam magic roadmap? Primordial giants, titans, and fairies, and the like? Or will they, for the time being at least, simply be ordinary humans and dwarves and elves, except older and magical? And Tarn's response is, I think for time reasons, asset, prioritization, and some programming, etc., we won't have fully non-experiment proc humanoids just yet. And a multi-parter from Astix. And the first question is, what exactly do you mean by manageable in keeping the lab tile size to 3x3 to be manageable? If it's convenience for the player by the lab conforming to a standard workshop size, then a magic lab could be bigger, since there is one of them, and it's special visually. It's striking. or a big deal. A lab that is at least as big an event as the construction of a temple, I guess, unless multiple labs are to be built in lab zones. Or is there to be a lot of other equally striking magical workshops in the future? And Tarn's response is, I meant manageable in terms of creating art assets. A lot of the assets could be used in larger workshops, but we're still trying to keep things reasonably scoped. Moving on to their second question, will there be gameplay around upgrading the lab? For instance, requests by wizards for odd or rare resources for lab components to enable functionality, or upgrade a lab to increase the wizard's happiness and productivity. For example, resources like glass for distillation equipment, or metal for arcane magical equipment, or sending out collectors to a specific mountain to collect flowers for botany-based labs. It's possible to ask other workshops to make specialized components for labs and assemble them at the lab, similar to how musical instruments work. If that's too much micromanagement, maybe have a checklist and an upgrade button to add all workshop orders when the checklist is ticked. And Tarn's response is, part of what you'll be doing is assigning dwarves as lab assistants to do a variety of tasks for the resident wizards. I'm not sure if a given lab workshop will be upgraded with new bits, or if they'll be working towards an additional workshop. But yeah, stuff along those lines. And the final question, from Aztecs. For animations in procedural magic workshops, is it possible to give them a glow that lights up nearby surfaces using information in an alpha channel? I'm thinking of the flame animation under the cauldron in your recent video not lighting up the cauldron and floor, or the electric discharge animation not lighting up the background areas. This approach may work for glowing magical objects in general. And Tarn's response is, we have a variety of glows that cover the workshop and will light up things in that area using the alpha channel, but they didn't pass out of the 3x3 boundaries. 3x4 including the part that sticks up into the top due to technical limitations. And a question from Kadzar, and they write, in your recent post in the latest report, you mentioned earlier civilizations and era mode that happens before regular world gen. Besides magic, I'm curious how this will affect the world. Will these past civilizations leave behind ruins that can be explored, and will there be people in the present who existed in that time? Or will still existing civilizations have history of wars with them? I'm just wondering how it will be different and similar to current world gen. And Tarn's response is, time moves a lot faster, so certain details are omitted, mostly the weekly farming and economy, etc., which is pretty detailed in the regular world gen. In order to maintain some of the current feel for regular worlds, there is an age cutoff that's a bit catastrophic for anything too powerful, and it's generally of the burying sort, so that the dwarves can interact with the ruins. As we get more comfortable with magic and magical societies, this can be softened and diversified into more types of ruins and eventually more living civs. I'd expect for the first release only a few of the older civ people that are highly magical will survive to see regular world gen. A question comes in from Fat Ace, and they say, have you or do you know how much of a reach modders will get to go off with the first round of the magic update? In my mod, I have quite a few of the secrets that delve on various forms of magic, such as fire, water, ice, lightning, and wind, and so on, and various forms of hybrid types and mutations and types of magic. I've been wondering if the magic update will allow me and other modders to expand and change and shift our magic system into a proper system, other than interaction shoot X item, interaction 2 breathe this cloud, interaction 3 apply this effect type of stuff. It would be lovely to be able to go all out in properly making each attack, buff, debuff, etc. feel more unique, other than just slight variations of different spells with different names. And Tarn's response is, you should have access to a lot of the new generation raws and scripts. The universal forces are entirely Lua, that produces standard raws. I think some things that aren't out in Lua yet, such as historical figures and religions, probably won't make it out until those core objects get Luified, but you'll be able to do quite a bit more. And those of the nuts and bolts and ritual costs and new integration tags, etc. will be available. And a question from Radiant Psych, and they say, will we get procedural materials? For example, an ore, which upon touch causes burns to goblins. And they elaborate quite a bit on this subject, but I'm just gonna jump to DPH Kraken's response, which Tarn quotes here. There are already several procedural materials generated by the game in mythic sites, though their properties don't really vary, preventing them from doing so. But the properties you suggest are a little more than what the game is currently capable of, since touch syndromes only apply to splatters, but I imagine it'll be looked at, so that magic materials can have more effects beyond their toughness or thermal properties. And Tarn's response is, as DPH Kraken mentioned, we started down this route a while ago, with Evil Rain, Forgotten Beast Goops, Divine Materials, and Primordial Remnants and Liquids, but there's a lot more to do, and we're all for continuing along in this way. And a three-parter from Stained Class, and they write, many mouse clicks become integrated to macros, or do you just plan to remake the full keyboard control to make the game fully macroable? And Tarn's response is, I imagine luification of the interface would make the keyboard approach much easier, but maybe these mouse commands will end up with proper identifiers that could be used in macros in the process as well. Stain's Class's second question is, may the way heat is handled will be changed? Notably for magma. Realistically, the miner in this image should be dead or cooked by heat. And Tarn's response is, we have to be careful with letting magma do much outside of its tile, or we'll have the whole mountain melt, since magma doesn't cool. And Stained Class's third and last question is, why is 0 such a low temperature? It is minus 5282.5405 Kelvin, and way under absolute zero. Is there a technical or development reason? And Tarn's response is, we wanted to have magically accelerated heat gradients if I remember. Lots of other ways to do that though. The next question is from Grant4455, and they write, locations right now like taverns and temples allow you to recruit specific people to perform tasks inside of them, scholars, performers, and priests, etc. But it seems to me that the guilds are the odd one out, especially now that dwarves will give lectures, if they have standing in a guild, which will confer skill on anyone attending the demonstration. Has any thought been given to allowing appointments as guild masters? And if so, what functions they might perform, outside, of course, the obvious demonstrations? I seem to recall something like this used to exist many versions ago, as a noble role. And Tarn's response is, yeah, that would be cool. We used to have them, and mainly they organized work slowdowns. I think when they come back, they should have some sort of positive effect on teaching the craft. Main thing we want to do with guilds is set up an apprentice system so that the dwarves' children can pair up with masters assigned to workshops, and we can have a whole cool thing come out of that. Maybe some of your mid-level workers travel as well, just all the normal things. And a couple questions from the Marmot, starting off with, will riding affect weapon properties, such as reach, once weapon reworks are on their way? And Tarn's response is, it'd be reasonable. I'm not sure exactly what will change. Relative positions of creature body parts and items for multiple creatures is sort of a tricky problem, but it would be very useful to have in all sorts of contexts. Marmot's second question is, would it be possible for NPCs to interact more with the world or settlements in adventure mode without the need of workshops, toiling the fields, butchering animals, or do they need to have specific workshops to interact with these reactions? And Tarn's response is, it's an open question. We wanted adventure mode to be a lot more granular than fortress mode, but ultimately we haven't had the time to do it, since the first pass might end up co-opting some workshop stuff instead. The third question from Marmot is, during the latest Tarn time, you mentioned that we could do sacrifices. Does this mean that changes to prisoners of war, as in their value as prisoners, and capturing creatures through other methods are coming soon? And Tarn's response is, not necessarily, like a cow or something is a normal thing. And the last of Marmot's questions, the old myth generator mentioned that creatures who were part of a certain bloodline were able to use special powers and magic. Is this also the case with the current idea of fort wizards? And Tarn's response is, we're not going to do everything from the prototype now that we are trying to keep release sizes manageable, but that was one of the generated possibilities there, and we are all for getting variety in terms of where the magic comes from. And a question comes in from Volleylol, and they say, since Magic the Gathering's secret lair gives the card Terror of Peaks, a creature flying, the visage of an ASCII dragon, does this confirm proc-gen dragons with flight will come to Dwarf Fortress in the near future? And Tarn quotes Dick Butt Degrade, and he says, no, absolutely not. And Tarn's response is, maybe it was flying like a projectile. You know, honestly, I think he makes a pretty good point here. The next question comes in from DPH Kraken, and they ask, will the prehistoric creatures be associated with any world gen mechanics like precursor civilizations, a lost wilderness, or immortal historical figures? Looking forward to liberating war-trained Wixa from the ancient Amolocaris man ruin. I think I butchered that. Tarn's response is, the prehistoric creature release won't have the Civ stuff we are adding for the Magic Era mode, since it's coming before that. There will be some new biome-like specifiers for them, if that counts as a lost wilderness. And the second question from DPH, likewise, are there any changes regarding how otherwise modern fauna spawn? Raising the species cap is an easy target, and frequency is inconsistently applied, causing endangered birds to be more iconic antagonists than brown bears or evil monsters. And Tarn's response is, I don't have specific plans here with the prehistoric stuff. And then there's a pile of questions from Cryosync, Orkius, and Eric Blank and Beeg, all with various different wordings, but they all kind of boil down to, will new prehistoric creatures have animal man or animal people and giant variants similar to the current set of animals? And Tarn's response is, it would be out of character if there was no prehistoric animal people, surely. We have leaned against giant variations, because the sizes of most of the creatures aren't as well known to people, so it doesn't have the same impact to see a giant one, and some of them are already very large. Creatures like the giant velociraptor would be how large people think a regular velociraptor is, and other confusing things. Were-dinos would be fair, but I haven't done anything with that. And a quick one from Brewer Bob, and they write, regarding the recently announced Magic the Gathering cards, I'm curious to know why you chose to partner with Wizards of the Coast, a subsidiary of Hasbro. I was a bit surprised by this, since you've spoken out against corporate greed and mass layoffs, and Wizards of the Coast has been guilty of these exact issues. So I suppose my question is, was there a specific reason for the partnership despite Wizards of the Coast's reputation? And Tarn's response is, we were approached, the agreement was small and non-entangling, and there was a lot of excitement from pretty much everybody, as there were like 100 years of Magic the Gathering fandom in the team, so he decided to do it. And a multi-parter from Slow Person. Regarding Magic and infiltrators, what cascading and secondary behaviors are being anticipated? Thieves using magic to somehow bypass parts of the fort seems obvious, whether going for treasure, children, secrets, or whatever. But what about more subtle behaviors, like magically applying a curious beast item to a non-standard beast, and then sending the beast in instead? Or just doing a mapping task for a later siege, such as navigational mapping, as opposed to a magic user, just scrying during a siege? And Tarn's response is, I think it'll be enough at first to get the basics managed. Creative use of spells would be cool, but these generally need to be implemented one by one. The next question from Slow Person is, besides books or slabs, are there any other means of storing secret tokens being considered, or does it not matter? And the game will allow anything to store it based on a tag and magic that might apply. And Tarn's response is, I just have the standard tags currently, like mundane, recordable, or whatever. Others would be cool. I'm not sure if we'll get to any special knowledge items this time, but there should be all sorts. The third question from Slow Person, wizards and dwarves smoking is kind of a trope. I guess Tolkien had his vices. Where are the pipes at? And Tarn's response is, sitting in the notes where we left them many, many years ago. And the fourth and final question from Slow Person, since Magic will probably allow parting water bodies, rivers, water defenses, etc., are there some wave graphic tiles anticipated? And Tarn's response is, we haven't done the ocean properly yet. I'm not sure if we'll have any special graphics for the liquids. And a question from Orkius, and they say, with the announcement of the prehistoric creatures being added in the future, is it possible that we could see fossils added to the game that dwarves and other civs could end up excavating, possibly treated similarly to artifacts, being of varying value and randomly generated descriptions of different fossilized creatures from either prehistoric times or potentially even fantasy creatures, such as fossilized dragon bones, etc. And Tarn's response is, I think fossils would be cool. It would be a neat setting for the new stuff. And a final from the first half of this month's Future of the Fortress, because Tarn had to split it into two posts, is from Juice Thinger, and they say, will the new prehistoric creatures introduce new creature mechanics or have multi-tile graphics? I can imagine hunting them involving pit traps and coordinated spear throws. Anything to be expected there? And will creatures be able to go extinct? And if so, what factors will lead to that? And Tarn's response is, they won't fundamentally change how creatures work. even though it is true that some of the new ones are very, very large, or very weird. We didn't get to the giant cage wagons and won't before the Dino release, but the pressure's certainly there. We haven't added creature extinction outside of what can already happen to the local wildlife populations. Next up, we've got a 4-parter from Crundlebone Earring. And they write, when it comes to the newly mentioned prehistoric animals, how do you intend to deal with missing information? Nowadays, we know a lot about them, but there are many things that we either still don't know or that are still highly debated, such as things like coloration, diet, habits, etc. Will those take from whichever is the current consensus, or will you use mystery to add your own spin to them? And Tarn's response is, I don't think we're going to try to go far afield. We usually try to be semi-educational with stuff like this anyway, though the consensus seems to shift quite rapidly, so that's difficult. The second of their 4 questions is, since you will be deep in the trenches making new creatures, how likely are we to see improvements, either broadly or individually to the existing ones? I know it is bad form to ask for specific numbers on upcoming updates, but how many animals are you planning to implement roughly? And is the current plan to release them in a single update, or a series of updates? And Tarn's response is, it's going to be one big update. The number is to be announced. And the last of Crundlebone's questions, will the game meaningfully distinguish between the prehistoric animals and the extant ones? Or are they going to work exactly like any other animal? Tarn's response is, there will be distinctions in terms of how they are grouped and placed, and there will be settings. The next question comes up from Enemy Post, and they say, really excited to see dinosaurs coming to the base game. How do you plan to have them integrate into the world? Will they be regular animals, savage creatures, or a new kind of savage analog, a cavern layer creature, or a world option? And Tarn's response is, there will be settings. The 2 main settings would be for people who want to see them a lot and to have them in lots of savage areas. The other settings is to make them more rare, would be to have certain isolated savage biomes, and underground areas once we get to the rewrite. In both cases, there'll hopefully be an option to either separate or mix your areas. Sometimes you want Cenozoic and Jurassic stuff together in prehistoric hodgepodge settings, and sometimes you want things to strictly stay in their lanes. Sometimes you don't mind if Jurassic and Cretaceous are together, but you don't want them in Cenozoic or Cambrian stuff. We're going to try to accommodate several different feels, and this should also let modders have some new control over biomes and population placements, since our tagging system will all be out in the raws and scripts, though it won't allow you total control over biomes, since that's too big to bite off this time. And a 3-parter from Beeg, and they say, what sort of magical treasures might adventurers find exploring the magical ruins of long-dead civilizations? And Tarn's response is, I don't know yet, but there will be magical items and secrets. Beeg's second question is, what sort of dangers might be in store for adventurers exploring the magical ruins of long-dead civilizations? And Tarn's response is, I don't know yet, but the ruins won't always be safe. And Beeg's third of this quick lightning round is, how much information on the prehistoric magic civilization will be viewable in Legends mode? And Tarn's response is, all of the era mode events, historic figures, sites, and civilizations are encoded as usual, so you'll be able to see everything that happened. And a big block question from Eric Blank, so let's read it. Will prehistoricness be a moddable token so modders can add to the prehistoric populations and have them respected as being prehistoric? Are recently extinct creatures going to be treated as prehistoric, or contemporary, or normal species, or other creatures that went extinct only due to human activity in the last 10,000 years, such as Australia's giant monitor lizard and the giant rhino wombats, distinct enough from surviving wombats to not be worth calling a giant wombat, or other examples. On the magic side, and admittedly quite suggestion-y, and a lot of my own goals, how amenable are you to letting us add magic properties to items through reactions and interactions, or by item tool definitions, in these next few updates? Adding new interactions that can apply to mythic site artifacts works wonders, but I'm thinking ways to get new magic items in play post-World Gen, maybe at civ levels, like distributing magic weapons. It's been a long-standing dream of mine to simply be able to tie interactions to books and choirs, like necromancy can be, or to a spell book that have them by default, as well as magic wands, or simply performing a reaction at a workshop directly granting an interaction to the creature that performed it. I can imagine that kinda coming into play with the new magic workspaces for wizards, but I'm not sure if that's even remotely accessible in the sense that outcomes or possibilities are moddable. When the wizards make a new spell, is it a hard-coded game event? injected in or controlled by an interaction framework that can include raw modded variations? Can I introduce Wizardry by infecting a current citizen dwarf with an interaction with the current tokens, and they'll start acting like these wizards and petition for workspaces? Does it follow a reaction framework that can be done at custom workshops and custom reactions? And Tarn's response is, there should be several new tokens that interact with a biome placer. The tokens themselves will be arbitrary, and you'll be able to make them whatever you want. I'm still pondering the exact format we can do that in the time we have. It won't cover a full biome rewrite. I could go either way on that. I think ultimately, I'll probably just group them as recently extinct regardless of the 1400-year cutoff, just to avoid confusion. In regards to modding, we are definitely headed this way. Hopefully the entirety of proc generation and research, trees or whatever, will be out for modding. The elements which are more difficulty currently are things like the historical figures and religions that don't have the raw and script components currently. I think there might be an entity component that drives some wizardry behaviors, so wizardry by disease might not work entirely as it relates to forts. I think it might be a half and half thing, depending on how certain bits are coded. I'm not far enough along yet. We're still coding up some of the ritual structures. A lot of it could certainly use the reaction framework, but the reaction framework would also need a buffing up. I'm not sure if it 100% accommodates to handle certain rituals. And a question from Zioniji, and they say, how malleable do you intend sapient creatures to be long-term? Currently, all dwarven civilizations share the same language and ethics. Is that because the dwarven gods made them that way? Or is it a limit of the current scope of development? Would the conceptual dwarven civilizations have diverged from proto-dwarven tribes to reach their own ethics and languages, gradually develop dialects as they disperse and eventually adopt loanwords and ethics from their trading partners and different sapient creatures joining their civilization? And Tarn's response is, long-term we'd like it all to be modifiable. We've talked quite a bit about language and language change with shifting laws and etc. And we have a tiny bit of that now. We'd like to do more. Then things would likely start with some core proc range of dwarfiness in each world and then go from there. A question comes in from Ear, and they say, are you planning on adding teleportation? And Tarn's response is, I doubt that we'll get to it this time, in any full or interesting way. It certainly is fun to talk about, and the more long distance and fast and cheap it is, the more it breaks stuff. I don't think a short range expensive, slow teleportation breaks much in comparison. So there's a variety of opportunities and difficulties to be discussed. I would personally like to try to tackle something at least somewhat interesting here that has some weird implications, but not for this release. And a multi-parter from Shirakage, and they write, will necromancers get new abilities other than raising dead or other passive abilities? Or a broader question, will necromancers be included in the magic system, or is that a separate category? And Tarn's response is, they are included. Part 2, will the gods play an active role in the overworld? Physical forms casting spells, talking to people directly, or fighting against each other and having messengers? And Tarn's response is, I don't think it'll be something that happens during play in this first release. Myth and world generation era modes are a different matter. And the third part of Shirakage's questions. Is proc-gen creatures, races and wildlife, etc. a thing in this update, or is it hard to implement right now? And Tarn's response is, it's a matter of time to get the assets up with their associated scripts. So I think it's not going to be changed in this release. The fourth part of Shira's questions, how many magical effects or spells will we see? In the YouTube video, we saw lots of lab types, and this gave me a hope that there will be more than I imagined. And Tarn's response is, I don't have a count yet, but even within a single effect type, there will be a lot of varieties in terms of power and costs, so they'll feel sometimes like different spells feel in other games and systems. For instance, water creation when applied to a single tile from 1 to 7 versus creating 50 tiles of 7 to 7 water with varying degrees of specificity in the targeting, and paint tiles versus general areas with casting times between near instant and a season. These feel very, very different despite all being one interaction effect type. And the fifth part of Shira's questions, how will things be in adventure mode? Will we be able to use labs, or will there be another way to use or learn magic? And Tarn's response is, I don't think we'll get to Adventure Mode Labs until site building comes back. At that point, it would be cool to make your own little wizard towers and stuff. And lastly, the sixth part of Shirakage's questions. Is it early to talk about the release date for this update? Seeing there is already a splash art, prehistoric creatures are coming, which is actually a key part of the myth stuffs. I was thinking this update was also coming with the prehistoric creature update or around those times. And Tarn's response is, we'll announce it when we have it. The magic update is not the prehistoric creature update. The prehistoric creature update is its own thing, and that is happening early in the summer. And a big block of multi-parters from Lan, and they say, the MythGen stuff is now referred to as the Era mode. So, I have to wonder, is it going to be separate from the current Legends mode? And Tarn's response is, Myth Generation and Era mode are two different things, but they overlap in the sense of the prototype from GDC. They are separate from Legends mode in the sense that Legends mode is something that you look at after all the world generation. And Myth Generation and Era mode are parts of the larger world generation process and only occur at that time. You can view mythological and Era mode events in Legends mode. I haven't yet adopted a perspective view from the GDC prototype, because there isn't a Legends mode category like the humans to select. Era mode officially begins when there's a civilization recording a year, and MythGen is before that. But it's only a semi-important distinction when it comes to which events are possible and which are ongoing. The next question from Lan. You mentioned in the PC Games interview that you don't really care about balance as it relates to the magic generation. Has this perspective changed as the situation surrounding the game has changed? And if you have shifted gears to make more balanced approaches, will there be the option to generate something less balanced and more chaotic in custom world gen settings? I need my nearly unplayable magically hostile worlds. And Tarn's response is, I'm still basically in the same place. I think the world gen parameters are all we need to capture a broad range of possibilities. The third part of Lan's big detailed question list, I've seen talk of resident wizards. Is this just used here as shorthand for any magic user? Or is it going to be a more defined thing? With respect to that, will magic generation be able to create systems that the entire species can use without specialization? Like the example you've speculated about before. All dwarves can teleport at will with whatever cost. And Tarn's response is, resident wizards are residents that are wizards, so it's more specific than just being a magic user. It's vaguely similar to the scholars that can come to petition to reside in your fortress, but it's tied in the new workshops and little magical journeys your helper dwarf lab assistants can take, and all that, and fortress defense. And the part 4 of Lan's questions. The magical workshops look great, but I'm really curious about the way they work. If a magic system is generated in such a way that it doesn't have much in the way of workshop tasks, will that magical system still get workshops? If so, what will you be able to do with it? Will every magic system that uses workshops anyways, if you're making that distinction in this release, get its own workshop? And if so, how will that work with non-dwarven citizens joining your fort? You have access to the dwarven magic shop, and then a human wizard comes along. Do you gain the ability to make human magic workshops? Do you always have the ability to build any magic workshop in your fort, even if no citizens can access that magic system? Or do they not get access to a magic workshop? And Tarn's response is, the new lab workshops are currently set to have a few purposes. One is paying some ritual costs. One is producing magical objects that are already understood. Another is researching new magic. So in the case where a magic system might not use items, but still has some potential, or there are things to do, like meditate while surrounded by mirrors and skulls, the workshops will still come up. If you gain a new resident wizard, your agreement with that wizard involves them needing and sharing a workshop spec. You should get the workshop spec at that time. If we release with, or later have a situation where the dwarves are more innately magical, or their civs have an entrenched magic type, you'll just be able to make it a regular workshop as you would a carpenter shop. It's unclear whether we'll get to these situations at this time, but we're trying to plan the system to encapsulate as much as we can. And the fifth part of Lan's question. It's a very long one, as you can see. Because I'm thinking about those worlds where the fantasy rating is cranked up to the max, are procedurally generated civilized entities something that you're holding off on until the ability to play as non-dwarf civilizations are set up, or can we expect to see them sooner? If we see them sooner, and we have our fantasy rating cranked up to the max so dwarves don't exist, how will this work in Fort mode? And Tarn's response is, if you crank the settings up until dwarves don't exist, you either don't have a playable mode or you do. So it all kind of comes together. We've always wanted the ability to have non-dwarf weird settings, and we'll still at least need a procedural proc-humanoid maker before we get there, or enough of the map rewrite that human towns become feasible. One or the other should be first. I don't know which. The sixth part of Landland's question, are magical workshop ports something you got in preparation for a future where workshops are split into segments for modularity, as you've discussed before? And Tarn's response is, it wasn't specifically related, but the thought did cross my mind. And we have more compatibility in that direction now. I still have no idea what's going to happen there though. Part 7 of Landland's question, you've mentioned that the map rewrite stuff would support more mythological world generation and the retirement of the current specifically good and specifically evil areas we have right now. Are these future sphere-associated areas going to have generated sphere-associated wildlife and or weather? And Tarn's response is, yes, as we proceduralize the biomes, that means everything about them as we are able. Part 8 of Landland's 10-part question block is as follows. I might be wrong, but I think that I remember you mentioning that before the map rewrite stuff would also allow for other fluids to exist in the way water and magma do, and that you were hoping for this to be something that could be plugged in with the myth and magic generator to allow for strange things like oceans of blood, wine, milk, acid, or any number of other liquids. Is this still in the plans, or if it ever was? And Tarn's response is, it's not happening in this release, but yeah, exactly. Oceans of milk, blood, and the normal things. The main difficulty is mixing interactions with other fluids. If we don't worry about mixing, I don't think that it's a huge issue to get it working. But the mixing issue is quite annoying, especially since we opted for 7 units of liquid per tile, and it'll be really weird if it's not handled in some way. Part 9 of 10, you've mentioned that other planes of existence wouldn't come up until the map rewrite content came. Does this mean that they won't appear in gameplay, or are you holding off on implementing them into the era generation until their existence can be reflected in gameplay? And Tarn's response is, I think the other places will probably exist before you can visit them. And the 10th and final part of Landland's questions, how does it feel to finally be chipping away at what is definitely the most widely anticipated block of content for this game? And Tarn's response is, it's pretty cool. It's going to be exciting to get some variety and a little wonder back in the game. It's a bit frustrating at every turn to not have my big weight worth of time to dig into everything, but at least it seems like we can get something viable out that at least touches on several of the things we wanted to do. Then there's the rest of development after that to continue. Another question comes in from Eric Blank. Is it going to be possible to generate worlds with no myth gen phase and no prehistory phase? So like world gen as we have now? And Tarn's response is, I think so. The no myth gen phase was part of the no magic setting as originally conceived. I think that where myths would be generated on a per civ basis, but all be merely myths. And that is not done yet. And the no prehistory phase isn't hard to keep, but it might feel more artificial than ever with the 4X style start for the civs. And a question from Volleylol. In the Myth Generation demo presentation, mythical actors, the Comet, were represented by raw objects. Will this be the case in the first Myth and Magic release? And Tarn's response is, this is one of the complicated questions right now. Lua isn't yet made for historical figures, but something might still be appropriate. We're hoping to have some raw encoded example deities. We also have astronomical and cosmological objects, now as a different sort of thing. We'd like to support more and more settings with their named things, but we might have to wait for a little more Lua functionality before it can really flower. And a multi-parter from Rorax, starting off with, what's your view of specific Incrust mods and recipes people invent to that effect? Was it left out of the game due to frame rate side effects or game lore reasons? And Tarn's response is, I wouldn't have a problem with the magnifying glass specifying everything for Incrust jobs. I'm just not sure if this is what you mean. Part 2 of Rorax's multi-parter. There's some confusion about the bug tracker. Is it moving to Jira, or is it staying on Mantis? Is it being used at all? There are several software professionals in the community, and it would be great to have an environment to make bug reporting less irritating. And Tarn's response is, I'm not aware of any plans here, it's still used. Rorax also wants to know about luification. And Tarn says, the interface? That's in the same place it was before. And the next part of Orax's questions, I think I saw you using the legendary Notepad++ in one of your videos. Good old reliable. Curious on what your opinions are on other text editors. What does Putnam use? Do either of you have a preferred typeface? And Tarn's response is, I'm just using regular Notepad. I have no idea what Putnam uses. I don't set the font either. And the last two questions, Tarn combines his answer into one, so I will read them as one question. Any thoughts on palettes on the interface? Are there many mods that are essentially this static asset, but with a hue adjust, like borders, buttons, etc.? I'd really like to change the minimap super saturated sky teal color. And same for fog. There's likely several dozens of mods, all to regulate its color and transparency. And Tarn's response is, it'd be reasonable for every hard-coded color to be out and changeable. And a question from Plump Helmet Man that's then followed up by a curious cat. There are certain events in the current version of Dwarf Fortress that feel like they should be part of a mythic past, but instead happen in regular world gen, such as the pacts between demon lords and deities and creation of vaults and mysterious dungeons, birth of the first mega beasts and titans, etc. As part of the magic update, is the timeline of these events planned to change so that they happen in the era mode instead? And Curious Cat follows up with Plump Helmet Man and asks, if dragons are born in the era mode, does that mean that we'll see fully grown dragons at the start of regular history gen? And Tarn's response is, some of those are currently done in a before time when you look at Legends mode, and all those are top candidates, of course, for happening in either myth generation, pre-recorded history, or era mode, years recorded. A dragon born in world gen should get its full size. We're aiming for at least 3,000 years for era mode. And just a few more questions to round things out. One from Rat Bastard, and he writes, will the demons themselves be getting magic that they can then teach to the sorcerers that they train? Or will they simply train sorcerers without having any magic of their own? And Tarn's response is, the demons already have their sphere-based magics, and whether these are trainable is up to the generator. I think it's fair for it to work more variously. In one incarnation of Snatchers, they were being taken because they could learn things goblins couldn't. Anyway, but at this point, that would have to be an implication of myth gen. My sense is that the straightforward way to introduce the things we want is to just have the demons know lots of relevant things that they can teach. And two final questions from PT Kato, which Tarn answers as one, so I'll read them as one. Are there any plans to revisit the percentage amounts of material retrieved when melting items? Maybe scale with the furnace operator skill level. Are there any plans to add some kind of recycling mechanic akin to melt item, where you get the materials back for stone items, glass items, or clothes? And Tarn's response is, it would be reasonable. It's the sort of thing that'll happen those days when it gets high up in the quality of life pile. I know handling damaged clothes is a common request. And that brings us to the end of possibly the longest, chunkiest, thickest Future of the Fortress I've done in years. That is kind of wild. Thank you for making it to the end if you did. Definitely leave a comment on this one, specifically thanking my editor, who listens to my voice for hours at a time whenever I record these. Thank you very much for watching this video, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you in the next one.